The death penalty. My proposition is that the death penalty is counterproductive. I'm going to be talking about the methods of execution, innocent executions, and the cost. The death penalty is unconstitutional and violates the 8th Amendment, which states excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. The methods of execution include hanging, a firing squad in which like a group of armed men fire at the inmate, but there's only one bullet in one of the guns, so like the officers do not feel guilty. And electrocution. This is basically when the inmate is strapped to a chair and electrocuted, and this can happen up to 3 times, each session lasting up to 10 to 12 minutes. Lethal injection, which it's basically a paralyzing chemical that's injected into the inmate's veins, which kind of paralyzes them and they can't really express their pain. And lethal gas, which is like a gas chamber, where the inmate would be locked in a room and then it would be filled with gas and they can suffocate up to 10 minutes before dying. California provides the lethal injection administered unless the inmate requests the lethal gas. According to the Declaration of Independence, all men are created equal, that they are endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This brings me to my second point. The people who are executed may be innocent. Capital punishment is murder, especially of the innocent. According to the documentary The Last Word, Johnny Frank Garrett was born the 24th of 1963, and he was accused of murder and rape of a nun at the age of 17. Strapped to a table, his last words were, "You know, Warden, as a matter of fact, there are some things I like to say. I like to thank my friends and my family, and I like to thank my girl and everybody else that has helped me through all this. And for the rest of this world, well, you can kiss my ever-loving ass, because I'm innocent." 12 years later, it turns out he was innocent, because DNA testing identified Leoncio Perez Rueda as the killer of an elderly woman and the nun that he was accused of raping and killing. At the age of 17, his life was cut short and ruined. If this happened before, it could happen again. Furthermore, a study from UC Berkeley Law shows that there are at least 200 wrongfully accused executions carried out, with California in the lead. This brings me to my final point. The death penalty uses substantial law enforcement resources, meaning a lot. According to LA Times, it costs about $308 million for every 13 executions since 1978, since it was reinstated. In other words, like if you do the math, it's about $23 million per inmate. Mainly because the penalty system requires a series of court trials, which include pretrial, automatic appeals, state petitions, and incineration. State punishment has cost taxpayers about $4 billion in California alone. According to the Legislative Analyst's Office, it only costs about $47,000 a year to incarcerate an inmate in California. Incarcerate meaning in prison. The bottom line is the penalty clogs our legal system, such as the federal courts. It's also expensive and not 100% accurate. Therefore, it is counterproductive. Life in prison sounds like a better alternative. Thank you, that's all.
Just tell me, it's not a secret.
4 minutes, 7 seconds.
Say it again?
4 minutes, 7 seconds.
Okay, thank you. All right, Josh, the proposition is clearly stated at the beginning. The preview that you have really just consists of a listing of terms or ideas without making any declarative statements. It's not until you get to the body of the speech that some of those declarative statements get presented. On the first point, it turns out that you're making an argument about its constitutionality, which I suppose is it is a claim of fact if you're saying it's unconstitutional. But you don't really offer any proof on constitutionality. Your only information on this point is a description of what the execution methods are and how long it takes, without telling me that those methods of execution violate the standards of the Constitution in some way. So I assume that that's why you're presenting those particular cases, but I don't really think that you go very far on this. How are we supposed to use this information in making that inference on that first point? The second point, the claim of innocence being executed, was, I thought, developed. That was probably the point that was best developed in your speech. You've got a good example to start with. It's dramatically told. You've got a nice, I do think you want to make sure that you remind us of the source citation on that. It sounds like it's a film that it was presented, but I don't really know who the producers of the film were and how they got this information, so I think some follow-up would be appropriate here. The follow-up that you did have in the presentation involved a second study that was not presented clearly. It sounded like you're paraphrasing some numbers there. Try to keep the quotes exact from the source. It was a University of California study, I think, where you mentioned the number of people who might have been executed who were innocent. But like I said, it sounded like a paraphrased number as opposed to a quote. So you want to be careful about that. Like I said, I thought that that was the strongest part of the speech in terms of development. On the cost issue, there's a comparison between the between the amount of money that it costs for executions and for imprisoning people. So obviously, from the point of view that you've described, the appeals process is the primary culprit for a lot of the extra charges. I'm not so sure that that's automatically resolved, because appeals don't necessarily disappear if you don't have a capital case. They might exist in a different context. So you'd have to show that that would go down substantially. Also, there's an argument that says that the courts are clogged and that we don't have the resources, but I didn't hear any demonstration that the resources are limited, or that cases are not being heard, or that there's any harm from the cases that do go to trial where the death penalty is involved, that's kind of squeezing out other cases. I think we need more information on that. That's the inference that you're implying there, and I think that the evidence on that is lacking. You had a couple of quotes that you cited. You had the one incident from the film that you mentioned, and then you also had, like I said, that study that I think was quoted, I'm not saying out of context, but it was definitely paraphrased in the outcome. So there's a little bit of information in the speech, but there's a lot of additional information on this presentation on these issues that I think could have been developed on this particular point. So I would say the one generalization was pretty sound. The others are kind of iffy, especially that first one. You're doing an okay job speaking to the audience. You have more time, so it could be developed more. Thank you.